Hello and welcome to Double Feature Reviews. I'm Libby.
I'm David.
And today we're talking about THX 1138. Is that how they want us to say it? Or is it 1138?
I think they wanted to say 1138, but they do call him 1138 sometimes in the movie. So, like, even the people in the movie, they get it.
Okay, THX 1138, the most official title, and Logan's Run. David, had you seen either of these films before?
I have seen both of these films before. I have seen both of these films before several times. I guess I just have to confess right off the bat that I'm a huge fan of these movies, and these movies are like totally up my alley, and I'm the target market for these movies, and I love them.
I had not seen either of them before. I'd never heard of THX 1138. Did you ever see... is it available to watch the original version of THX 1138?
I have seen, depending on what you mean, the original version. If you mean George Lucas's student film that this is based on, this is George Lucas's first movie, and it's really his first movie, and he based on a student film he made while at USC. I have seen the USC student film.
Okay.
It's about 15 minutes long. It doesn't have the full narrative structure of this movie. It's basically just the escape action sequence. But yes, I've seen it, and it's not hard to find.
And for Logan's Run, I had not seen the film, but I had seen a couple of clips of it because I was working on another project where I needed clips of Michael York. And I think I picked the two worst possible clips to see out of context. So I went into this film with very low expectations, which were very much exceeded. So I'm not actually sure if I think this film is good or if it's just so much better than I thought it would be.
Yeah, I think there are quite a few people who have a similar experience with Logan's Run because it's a pretty silly movie. It is silly. It's silly looking. And though in some ways it's a really enjoyable and entertaining production, it's also cheesy and campy in some ways that are not fully intentional. And so I think a lot of people come to it not expecting a lot. It's also one of the most parodied movies out there. People make fun of it a lot. And it's secretly actually a very good movie. That's, I think, a normal experience to have when watching it for the first time.
Okay. Was that your experience when you watched it for the first time?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm the target market for these type of movies. So I went into it thinking, the first time I watched it, okay, well, I'll watch one of these movies. I got to check it off my list of all of these movies, and, I'll probably have a pretty good time. And then I realized that this is a good movie. It's very silly, and there are things worth making fun of. But it's also quality in all the ways that you should enjoy a movie.
And of course, we've both come up with titles for this pairing, this sort of marquee title. Mine takes a little bit of explanation, but do you think yours is going to take more explanation?
I don't know. Why did you go for it?
Okay, so my title for this double feature is On the Run in Rat Park. Does Rat Park mean anything to you?
I assume this is a reference to academic studies involving putting rats in miniature cities.
Close.
Okay.
So, there's a little bit more. I don't think Rat Park exactly has like one-to-one correlation with these two films, but there's just a lot of themes that they have in common. So I thought Rat Park was an appropriate thing.
Is this the one where they put the rats in the little miniature city and gave them all the food that they can want, or is this a different one?
They did do that, but that's not the point of the study. The Rat Park study was in the late 70s, so after these films had come out. But it was sort of a correction, or maybe a refinement, of earlier studies that had been done on heroin. So in these earlier studies, they put rats by themselves in these little boring cages, and they gave them food, water, and a button they could push that would release heroin. And as it turns out, the rats would push the heroin button until they died, until they overdosed. And so this has informed a lot of the US's drug policy. It's like heroin itself is addictive, and people will do it until they die, so we just have to never let anyone near heroin or in fact, maybe just any drug. And so Dr. Bruce Alexander, a Canadian biologist, I'm guessing, did a new experiment where he built a way bigger cage for the rats, 200 times standard lab rat size. He gave them like fun balls to push around, little spinny wheel that they could run in, other rats to play and have sex with. This was a co-ed rat experiment. And the rats got 2 different water bottles. One was plain water and one had morphine in it. And the rats would occasionally go for the morphine water, but they preferred the plain water. What this revealed is that if you have nothing else to do, you will do heroin, and that also the way to address heroin addiction is by improving social cohesion, creating better living standards, instead of just preventing people from having access to the drug at all.
Yeah, I am familiar with this study. I agree. It's a classic and really important and really interesting study. And yeah, the idea that people are using heroin or other drugs in this dangerous way to treat a problem in their life, to treat their depression or their sadness or their emptiness, their ennui, whatever idea or perspective you want to take on it. And that when people are living, or rats, are living happy, relatively healthy lives, they might enjoy doing drugs sometimes, but then it's just part of their life, not inherently an evil thing.
Yeah, so I thought there were ties because in our two films, we've got first a dystopian film where everyone is sort of, dopamine is outlawed or at least highly regulated, and everyone's taking drugs to regulate their brain chemicals.
Make them less desirous, less passionate, less engaged.
And then in our second film, everything is great. We've got fun things to do, fun people to have sex with, pretty colors. The space is big. You can walk around this big shopping mall. And I do think it's interesting that, we talk about the Rat Park experiment as being like good. Hooray for Rat Park experiment. It's better than this other experiment. But the rats were still in like an artificial controlled environment where they were being monitored. I don't know if the rats like being in there better or if they like being in wherever they want to go.
Yeah, and in the Logan's Run world, the Crystal City, they are definitely using drugs. They're having a good time. But drugs are not the great evil of their society, and it's just part of their recreational lifestyle. Maybe it's an opiate to keep them from, pushing against the darker forces that are controlling their lives. But interestingly, despite being ultimately a pretty conservative film, I don't think Logan's Run is an anti-drug film. It's not about how drugs are bad. It's actually about how drugs are great, and it's just too bad we can't quite configure society in a way that would let us do them without stress. So, great title. My title, also rooted in the world of 60s academia, is Love to Escape the Spectacle. And I think there's kind of two key points there. We have our escape in the middle, as what the plot of the film is basically about. So, the spectacle is a reference to situationist philosophy, which is a theory of culture and literature and psychology and philosophy, very prominent in the mid-1960s and early 1970s when these films are being generated. And it's about the idea that society uses the spectacle to control people. The spectacle is, we might call the media industrial complex. And it's about the idea that society uses entertainment, the news media, and other ways to get people to comply with ideas that they wouldn't really want to go along with and that aren't really in their interest. Because there's this grand world pushing this information at them to the extent that people stop even considering or trying to rebel against the ideas that are controlling them, and they just go along with it because it's what their life is like. That's their situation. They're part of the spectacle.
Is this related to Noam Chomsky's manufactured consent?
It's a similar and connected idea. Noam Chomsky is a college student at the time where these ideas are really being pushed, so I think that would be an excellent connection to it. The situationist philosophy is French. It's involved in the
You shock me.
Yes. It's majorly involved in the May 1968 protests. It will also shock you to hear, as a result of these facts, it's not particularly well-defined or super well-organized or clearly directed as a socio-political philosophy. So it's about a lot of different stuff. It's also about the idea that the way that you can connect with the world and break free from this spectacle is to have a somewhat undirected life, where you embrace the subtle things in the urban landscape around you that are not monotonous and that don't fit into this predefined program. And just by recognizing them and experiencing them, you can free your mind.
So by this is from France, you mean this is from Paris?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you got them.
I majored in French and Francophone studies, and the main thing I learned in that series of courses is that many people just conflate France and Paris, and they're actually pretty different.
And then love to escape the spectacle. Another thing that I think is really interesting about this movie is how...
There's two different movies.
These movies, thank you, is about how they are romances and how the core plot is actually driven by what I would describe as some subtle and interesting romantic situations. In our first film, THX is awakened by his wife, spouse, mate, whatever term we want to have.
It was really unclear what was going on there to me. We'll talk about that in a bit. By her taking away the drugs that are inhibiting his desire for her. And so she is, in a way, engineering their relationship. And this is what leads to his ability to even consider that he might not want to be part of this society. And in Logan's Run, we have a romantic relationship where at the beginning our characters don't really like each other, are not treating each other well, and... Not sexually compatible.
And their relationship is created by their desire to escape together. And I think we're going to have to talk about, are these real romances? Are these good romances? And the answer might be that these are not always the deepest and most successful romances, but I would say they're actually very believable and relatable romance stories. So we can get into that.
And if you haven't watched these films before, or if you did and weren't quite able to hold them in your mind, especially the first one, David is here to help you out with a little plot summary.
Great. I'm also going to give a little cinematography comment. I'm trying to add some visual scope to help us maybe imagine what the films look like or remember. So THX 1138 is a sci-fi drama. It's shot in a minimalist documentary style. The story is that the human, THX 1138, lives as a drone in a mindless future dystopia controlled by drugs, religion, AI, and vapid consumerist entertainment until his secretly liberated wife awakens him. In the first scene, we follow an optimistic montage from the iconic 1930s science fiction serial Buck Rogers and his heroic adventures to save the solar system. That's the opening scene. In the final scene, when the police spots abandon their recapture project after it is finally too far over budget to cover up, THX 1138 breaks out of the underground and stands in awe at the foreign light of the sun.
On Tatooine.
I've seen that shot before somewhere, haven't we? Yes, interesting. Well, there's a few more recycled pieces. Logan's Run is a sci-fi adventure. It's shot in a lush, open style. The story is that a future city where libertine freedom is celebrated, but no one can live past the age of 30, is upended when Logan 5 is forced into an undercover mission to root out the resistance. In the first scene, Logan 5 stares affectionately at his newborn son, Logan 6, until his Sandman police partner derides him for attachment to a biological child. In the final scene, as the Crystal City collapses into explosions, some of the residents escape to meet something they have never seen before. An old man.
THX 1138 is a 1971 film, at least when this version was made. It was written and directed by George Lucas, and Walter Murch also has a writing credit. I'm sure David will explain more about that in a second.
It was his story originally.
It stars Robert Duvall as THX or Thex, Don Pleasance as SEN or Sen, Maggie McOmie as LUH or La, Don Pedro Colley as SRT, not sure how to pronounce CERT, and James Wheaton as the voice of OMM or Jesus, or as I initially interpreted it, Albrecht Dürer.
So THX 1138 is George Lucas's first movie. That's what it's most famous for. This is George Lucas's first movie. And one thing you can tell from watching George Lucas's works is that he loved sci-fi movies for kids in the 30s and 40s. The work of Buck Rogers, which is explicitly referenced at the beginning of this movie, is paramount throughout all of his work. For example, the Star Wars famous title crawl is a direct pull from Buck Rogers. Buck Rogers invented and popularized that visual technique. So everyone that went to go see Star Wars in the 70s, that wasn't just a random thing they saw before. That was a reference to something they knew from when they were kids.
And in this film, the title sequence goes in reverse. It goes top down. Is that a Buck Rogers related thing, or is that a Lucas innovation?
I think it's partially just for visual effect. Another thing about the concept of the film is that George Lucas wanted to make a movie, he said, that was not a movie about the future, but a movie that came from the future. He wanted the audience to feel like they were watching a film that would have been produced by a thoughtful artistic film director living in the world that he was creating. And so maybe this is supposed to give us a sort of moving backwards in time experience, so that unlike the Buck Rogers or Star Wars experience, where we're partially given the feeling of moving into some sort of future, which I guess technically isn't true for Star Wars, maybe this is supposed to engineer the opposite. So the fact that sequence appears directly after the Buck Rogers reference, I think gives us a clue that you might be onto something there. From a young age, George Lucas wanted to make his own sci-fi movies, and he decided that the best way to make a sci-fi movie would be to use lots of real things. Buck Rogers is made before World War II. We might say before the true age of industrial and digital transformation had hit everyday people's lives. And so George Lucas, as a child in the 50s, is looking around and says, I see things that to me are futuristic. If I can just put a bunch of these things together in a movie, then it'll look like science fiction. And so from this, he developed this philosophy that he became his trademark, the idea of a used future. That what would make people really feel engaged with sci-fi images on screen would be if they didn't look like they were just manufactured, but they had been there for decades and they were real everyday things that people were used. If he could decrease the spectacular elements of sci-fi and make it more mundane and believable, then people could connect with it. So he brought this idea with him to USC Film School. This is another example of the film school generation. And here, this is really one of the founding documents of the film school generation. And, George Lucas, when we think of him, we think of his big blockbuster successes and his reputation in the industry. He is the definition almost of an industry director. But it's easy to forget that at the beginning of George Lucas's career, he was right there with Scorsese and Coppola and Terrence Malick, and considered one of the most inventive and creative and open-minded filmmakers. And he was the star of USC. He was the number one student that gained the most attention as the film school movement really took off. And he heard about this project created by, not Coppola, by the writer that we mentioned earlier, Murch, by Walter Murch. Walter Murch was his close friend. Walter Murch has gone on to become probably the most respected film editor and sound designer of all time. But they were close friends at USC, and Walter Murch is actually the originator of this film concept, along with Matthew Robbins, who is the co-writer of Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. And for what it's worth, in the final scene of THX 1138, when we emerge into the single sun of Earth, that's not Robert Duvall. That is Matthew Robbins in a bald cap.
Okay. I thought you were going to say that's a puppet, but
that would have been way better. But no, it's just Matthew Robbins. So that's the writer of Pinocchio right there.
Okay. Was Robert busy? Does Robert have a sun allergy?
Well,
were they actually filming that against the sun, or
that's a real shot. Okay. That's a 100%
not composite
shot. The final scene of THX 1138 when he's climbing out of the pit is one of the most celebrated visual moments in the film, especially that shot of him climbing out where you see the full pit stretching down behind him. It really is exciting and interesting and brings a dark sci-fi feel. Do you have a guess about how they filmed that scene? Because I know you love your practical effects.
So I'm guessing you're either going to tell me that this was a horizontal ladder, not a vertical one, or that there's matte painting involved.
It's a horizontal ladder.
Okay.
So that is actually a horizontal tunnel, and he's climbing down up the floor to get out of the tunnel. So that's real Robert Duvall when he's climbing out of the tunnel, but I don't think they felt like they needed to pay Robert Duvall money for the long shot as he comes into the sun. So
Robert Duvall never makes it out.
That's true. Robert Duvall is still trapped. The original student film was titled THX 1138 4EB. EB stands for Earthborn. So there's clearly even more going on.
The number 4,
then the letters EB. And this film almost didn't get made because it was considered too complex for USC's budget. So George Lucas made a deal basically where he agreed to teach the U.S. Navy filmmakers who got to attend USC, and then he got to use U.S. Navy facilities and tools to make the original student film happen, which is part of why it looks so much better than its competitor student films. And it won a lot of prizes. It won the first prize at the National Student Film Festival. It was the #1 student film of 1968. And it was from this student film that George Lucas got in contact with Francis Ford Coppola, who had already really pushed himself into the industry, had an established position at Warner Brothers, and he took on George Lucas as his mentee. And Coppola was so this is a Francis Ford Coppola produced movie. When Francis Ford Coppola is your tough business guy, you know you have a good relationship with the studio, at least for a while. Francis Ford Coppola gave him a budget of $777,000.77 because he's Francis Ford Coppola and he's a wacky guy who likes to do fun stuff. If I was George Lucas, I would have said, where's my $777? There's a bunch of zeros in the middle of this number, and that could be, 10 bald caps or something.
Yeah.
So I feel like if we're going to do the joke, let's do the joke. From the beginning, George Lucas had a few key ideas he really wanted to push in the film. He wanted to push the idea of a used future. He wanted to push that this was not supposed to be a movie about the future. And he made this very clear to the whole creative team. It was a contemporary story. It was a parable about life in 1970. And the goal was not to present a cohesive vision of a future life or to describe what society was going to become. This is about modern society. And he also wanted to push the very situationist idea that the tyrannical force controlling everyone in this dystopia was not powerful, was not efficient, was not perfectly designed, and was not even ruthless. Specifically, for example, the robo-cops in the film have basically no offensive capability. They
can whack you with a stick.
They cannot hit people with sticks. And at no point in the film do they hit anyone with a stick.
In a hologram they do.
In a hologram they do. Again, calling back to the idea of the situationist spectacle, that there is this grand media experience which is convincing people to not even consider rebelling. I think they're going to hit me with a stick. But he made clear the robots are incapable. They have been programmed where they cannot hit people with sticks. He told this to all the extras, in the theory being that the future society would never allow robots that could overcome the humans and take them over. So even their electric shocks, he says, were intended to be mild, not extremely painful shocks. He said the worst thing that the society can do to you is annoy you. The film was shot in California. Originally, George wanted to film in Japan, but he couldn't do that for $770,000.
Why Japan?
I think it's because he thought that Japan had a very ordered, shared lifestyle. And he thought that the actors would gain inspiration from Japanese culture for the culture that they were living in the movie. I don't think he's ever said that because that doesn't really sound like a very culturally insightful perspective. But I have heard him talk about his desire to film it in Japan, and frankly, that's the energy I get.
Okay.
He has said that in the interior design and some things about the flow of life, the crowded corridors, were inspired by his experience going to Japan. So I do think that's part of where he's coming from here. So
by Japan, he means Tokyo.
Well, I don't know what the subway system is like in Kyoto. You'd know. You can tell me.
It's not as
crazy
dense as it is in Tokyo.
Then it sounds like you meant Tokyo. Then yeah, that sounds right.
Y'all, you got to stop conflating countries with their capitals.
For the situationists, they're the people from France. But okay.
Paris.
One thing I think deserves a lot of credit in what makes THX 1138 interesting and enjoyable is the great extra work in the movie. And there's a lot of extra work where, again, constantly in people, around lots of crowds of people moving around. And everyone does a really great job. And it's not, I think, a total coincidence. One fact is that all of the overheard narration style dialogue, and I think we might be underselling a little bit here just how avant-garde this film is made in its style. Yes. For a film that was a major commercial release, we're going to see that it wasn't a hugely successful film, but did pretty well and is still considered a pretty accessible movie. It's got some weird avant-garde cinematic choices. Now, we talked about how it's extremely minimalist, flat in its imagery. The way that the story is presented is not always linear. We often get overheard narration about subjects that are different than what we're seeing on screen that then comes out to reference it later on. So there's often many different stories going on through the different media channels of the film. So all of the overheard narration that we hear is from a celebrated San Francisco-based theater group called The Committee, and he gave them brief character outlines of the subjects he wanted them to discuss, but then told them to totally improvise everything, and he would just cut it down. And I think, again, this was a great choice. Yeah. And you do really pick up on the natural dialogue, and you're also never tempted to follow any thread and make it all connected. It really does just feel live and give that improvised feeling. Also, the in-person extras were largely pulled from Synanon, a California-based drug treatment center group that was later revealed to be an incredibly violent and controlling cult.
Okay.
So part of the reason why I think the extras do an amazing job of delivering this experience of being stuck in a monotonous tyrannical lifestyle is because these people were stuck in a monotonous tyrannical lifestyle, and they may not have...
Where their brain chemistry was not okay.
And they're being forced to just perform this repetitive action for a machine, and they're really tired, and they may not even really know what's going on. So that wasn't all acting. That was a real experience that these people were sadly going through, but it does show on screen. The laboratory robot construction scenes
where we build C-3PO.
Where we build C-3PO in the director's cut.
Okay.
Yeah.
We watched the director's cut, apparently.
I guess we should mention that we watched the director's cut, and like many George Lucas's movies, this film was recut, re-edited, and lots of additional shots were added after Star Wars came out, and George Lucas was famous and had a lot of money. He said, well, now I have a chance to basically rebuild my first movie and bring it to my real vision. So there are a lot of things that we saw in the director's cut. First of all, there's a lot of really, really good image restoration, and there's some great looking images that didn't look good in the first print that look great in this print. So that's a real fact. But yes, all of the detailed robot scenes...
Yeah, that did look like it was way more high-tech than something I would expect from 1971.
They look good, but for CGI, they actually did, I would say, a pretty good job. But that's not in the original. In the original, we just see the robot arm pull in one of the little robo-cylinders, and then we cut. The whole... disaster scene, the sequence of Robert Duvall's eyes floating up into his head as he robo-connects, not in the original.
Okay. Oh, so he had to go in and redo that?
No, that's a digital effect where they googly-eyed him.
Okay, because I was like, wow, Robert Duvall is really committed because this would give you such a terrible headache. Yeah. And I hope they gave him the rest of the day off after shooting that. Okay, but that just didn't happen at all.
Not in the 1971 version. Okay. So that's digital googly-eying. And we'll maybe mention a couple of the other things, or I guess I'll mention them now. Probably, I think, the real crime of the director's cut is a very short 2-second sequence where we're sweeping through the halls and we see out the window this giant city with distinct apartment buildings and what look like roads and stuff traveling on them, which to me really ruins a little bit the whole design ethos of the film, the idea that everyone's living in one contiguous, cramped experience with no individuality and no distinction.
And no windows.
Also, a lot of the additional car chase scenes where we're whipping around on the highway, which again make it look like a much more free and open society than we've presented before. So, they've got the whole George Lucas ruined his movie treatment. Okay. I will say that I think that the image restoration in the director's cut is so great, and I'm so glad it's there. But I do think the original cut is, all things considered, a much better movie, because it does not show the details of the robot experience. And what I love about THX 1138, what really attracted me to it, is its refusal to do exposition. You know, it doesn't tell you the story through dialogue step by step. Yeah. And I really love movies that refuse to do exposition. I find them really immersive, even if they're challenging. Yeah,
this film is, I would say, even more than that, is allergic to establishing shots, which sounds like a criticism, and in many films it would be. That's what I complained about in Oppenheimer. But in this film, I think subverting the rule was the correct choice, because it feels disorienting and like you don't know where you are. All of these hallways kind of look the same, probably because they were all the same hallway. And I think to create a dystopia, it does work to cut out establishing shots.
There's a lot of smart rule breaking in the cinematography here. I noticed a lot of violations of the 180-degree rule. And again, I think it's very intentional, and it's designed to make you feel disoriented. It's designed to make you feel confused. And some of these are, for example, when he's going through withdrawal after La has taken away his anti-sex drugs, and he's reemerging into the real world. And so we should feel disoriented and confused and maybe even nauseated in these moments. So I think we're seeing the film school movement do its job and refuse to just blindly follow rules and open up its mind. But yeah, those scenes, those robo-construction scenes and those nuclear catastrophe scenes were filmed in front of a functioning nuclear radiation containment chamber. So they were there doing that stuff, yeah.
Not building robots.
They were not building robots. Maybe the second most famous thing about this movie is that the studio was very unhappy about the casting and styling of the OMM character, and they really wanted the OMM to be played by Orson Welles.
I think he would have done a good job.
This, of course, is at the lowest point in Orson Welles' career. He's a joke at this point, and he needs money.
You were never a joke to me, Orson.
I'm a big fan. And long story short, it sounds like he would have done it, and he might have gotten into it.
Would they have wanted him to, like, ham it up?
I think they would have wanted him to just do it in a pretty standard Orson Welles style.
Okay. Now, OMM, if you... you couldn't keep this in your brain, is the voice of Jesus, who's this sort of confessor / therapist / pharmacologist.
Consumer buying guide.
Yes.
Yeah, he's... In this society, they do need to have an outlet for religious ideas and for people's personal struggles, but they want to give as little time and energy to it as possible so everyone can get right back to work. So they just have a little booth and a picture of Jesus, and you go in there and you say, "Jesus, I'm sad," and Jesus says, "It'll be fine," and then you go out of the booth. And that's religion. We cut it down to the key parts. And so OMM is... it's a 15th century painting of Jesus. I don't actually remember what, but it's some famous painting of Jesus. Yeah. And they wanted Orson Welles to do the voice. I don't know if they wanted it to be a picture of Orson Welles instead of a picture of Jesus. I have to say, I think this would have been a great idea and made the film a lot better. Because Orson Welles is great to listen to. Yeah. That would have been fun and exciting. And I think it would fit in very smoothly and interesting with their idea of a society where religion and entertainment have become fused. Who would be the cool voice of Jesus for the rest of all time? Oh, I know. Let's get Orson Welles. I think that would have been a great bit and a great joke that everyone would have been part of. Now, George Lucas didn't want to do this. He fought really, really hard against it. Almost didn't get the film made as a result. Basically, it seems to be because he wanted the voice of Jesus to be black. Part of the film's message is a pretty dark message about the future of race and a society where it appears that black people and white people have been separated into separate castes, and they're not really supposed to have anything to do with each other. And white people do laborious, manual, or tedious work, and black people do entertainment and social activities. So I think he felt like this is going against one of the key ideas in the film, which is that all entertainment activities are black people doing it, and non-entertainment people doing it are white people doing it. I think it honestly would have been fine because this OMM character is a bit of a special character anyway, and we wouldn't have gotten too stuck on that. And
so to me that says he really wants us to think of this Jesus confession situation as entertainment.
That is, I think you're right. And I think he felt like part of his point was that the religious experience and the entertainment experience and the consumerist experience had been fully fused into one. And Orson Welles wouldn't fit that fully fused perspective. I don't think I think having Orson Welles do that role and having the more accessible commentary about what it was trying to say in general would have been more impactful in the film than definitively making the point that they've now been totally fused.
Also, this film is canonically in the 21st century, so 30 years at least after this film was made. If it had been Orson Welles, since he has such an iconic voice, I would have believed that this society started in the late 60s, early 70s, and just recorded Orson. Right. We had a AI of the actual actor, Orson Welles, who canonically exists in this film. And I
think that's how people would have interpreted it, and they would have loved it. Yeah. They would have felt like they were now part of their story. So
I also live in a world where Orson Welles exists.
I think I can see where Lucas is coming from here, but I think the studio was right. The studio was right.
I did have a question about the black characters that you can maybe clear. I think I figured it out, but I just want to make sure. So for most of the film, we don't see any black characters except in the holograms, which is effectively the TV. So I wasn't sure if black people still existed or if there were just only holograms of them. I wasn't sure if the holograms were totally fabricated or if these were projections of real people doing something. So eventually we get the character SRT, who is a black guy, shows up and he says, "I'm a hologram." And am I correct in interpreting that means my job is doing the holograms? Because my initial interpretation was he's saying, "Oh, I'm not a real person."
Yeah, this is one of the mysteries of the film.
Okay.
It's intended to be confusing and uncertain. Okay. However, there is an actual answer. Okay. It is deducible. We do meet this hologram. He says he's a hologram. What does that really mean? The key fact is that at the end of the film, when we come to our big car chase moment. Another thing that you need to know about George Lucas is that he really loves cars. You're going to see this more if you watch more of his later films. He really loves machinery, cars, and so he's very excited, of course, that he gets to get some big, high-budget race cars and play around with them for a few seconds in his movie. You can just feel that energy coming out of the camera. And so the SRT, in this final escape, he gets into the car and is like, "Great, I'm going to drive off." And then he realizes he has absolutely no idea how to drive a car or what they do, and proceeds to smash directly into a pole, totally crushing the car.
Not 10 feet in front of where he started.
Yes. Yeah. As Livy very insightfully pointed it out, or quoted in his mind watching the film, "Oh wait, they don't teach you how to drive in hologram school."
Yeah. Did I say that?
I'm so clever. It was a great line. I loved it.
To me that just means he doesn't know how to drive a car. That has nothing to do with whether or not you're a real person. This does not
answer your question. So
sorry, I'm not done with this. So if he's a hologram, he looks way realer than the holograms that Robert Duvall is watching in his room. And is someone projecting him? Who's projecting him?
We don't have the answer to that question. So when the police bots approach the crashed car in the parking lot, SRT is not in the car.
Okay.
He has disappeared.
To me, it was too smoky to figure out that's what was going on.
Look, when I was watching this time, I was kind of watching to see, could you tell clearly? You can't tell, but if you watch, he's not in the car.
Okay.
So this tells us that he really is a hologram, and it's probable that he is projecting himself. He tells us earlier on that he is an escapee from hologram world, and he just wanted to know what the real world is like. And though we don't really know, and it's kind of unclear, I think we have to take it out pretty face value. He is a hologram. He did find a way to project himself into the real world, and it appears to be voluntary.
In a way that is way realer than the other holograms.
Well, the other holograms, that's true. They're being projected, but they're being displayed as a hologram. Mm-hmm. He says that the Ministry of Information, or whatever he calls it, has developed alternate hologram realities.
Okay.
And apparently you can go straight in there. Maybe the Ministry of Information doesn't use this in the entertainment process because then the holograms would be able to escape and they wouldn't be able to control them. I gotta say, hologram society seems maybe more relaxed, more human. Mm-hmm. He seems pretty chill, all things considered. Like a pretty believable, expressive person.
Well, especially if you don't have an actual physical form. It does seem way more fun to work in show business than in manufacturing.
So this final chase scene was considered a technical marvel at the time. There is some pretty cool looking cars stuff. And probably the most famous and exciting moment of the chase scene is the final part after Duvall's car, THX's car has crashed, and we see one of the robo-policemen drive forward on a motorcycle about to grab him, sort of ramp up over a car, and then the robo-policeman flies into the air, falling off his motorcycle, and smashes into the ground, slamming into Robert Duvall's car. That sequence was not a stunt, and it was not supposed to happen.
Oh, yikes.
Yeah. So when they were building the ramp, the stuntman who was driving the motorcycle told him he wanted the ramp really tall and really sharp. And they said, really? Maybe not that. We don't really need it that tall and that sharp. And he said, I'm the stuntman. I'm the one who gets to pick. That's how I want it. They said, okay. So yeah, he went up way faster than they were planning and went up way higher in the air than they were planning. And he really did lose control of the motorcycle, flip over the handlebars. Now, before the shot was taken, George Lucas made very clear to the stuntman that for the shot to work, he had to land the motorcycle, slide into the car, and then fall off and lie on the ground because the stunt wasn't going to look that great. The point was the audience had to realize that whatever happened, it broke the robot. The robot is broken, and now... So just don't get up, he said. Just don't get up and lie down on the ground. If you do that, everything will be fine. So he jumps off the ramp, flies immediately off the motorcycle, flips over the handlebars, smashes into the ground, and then if you watch carefully, the motorcycle lands on top of him and then drives him, pushing him against the concrete into the car. And he just laid there. And everyone on the set was sure that he was dead. Mm-hmm. So they immediately rushed forward, trying to get him out of the gear and get him to his medical help. And he got really mad. He said, "Guys, you're ruining the shot." He was totally fine and completely uninjured by that sequence.
Wow.
If you go back and watch what happens in there, the fact that this person is totally uninjured, it's clear that he's in the right line of work. That's a durable body right there.
His bones are steel.
It's truly amazing that he was totally fine and did not need any medical attention after this.
Well, if you're a stuntman, you probably do a lot of training in how to fall correctly. So I think he probably got, the right limbs on the floor in the right order.
At 45 miles an hour, after being flipped over the handlebars of a motorcycle, he must be pretty good at falling.
Yeah, that's what I said.
And in for our sneaky, manipulative Sen character, a fun note is that several of his lines of dialogue are clipped from Richard Nixon speeches. So, of course, Richard Nixon was...
Sorry, Donald Pleasance was delivering lines spoken by Richard Nixon, or that's Nixon audio?
That's delivered lines spoken by Richard Nixon.
Okay.
So, of course, Richard Nixon is the sitting president at this time. Right. Probably not too popular with Lucas and his artistic friends.
Well, no one told him about this film. Someone told him about 1776, and I'm really mad about it.
What did he do to 1776?
He made them cut the song Cool Conservative Men. Because it makes conservatives look bad.
I bet if Nixon had called them, they would have said no and hoped that the controversy had brought a little bit of attention to their effectively student film. So I think it would have all worked out. But the line that Sen says when they're in the prison, one of the well-known lines is, "We need dissent, but creative dissent." That's a Nixon quote right there. So the film, when production was complete and was shown to the studio was really, really mad. Warner Brothers said that they wanted to just cancel the movie, basically to punish Coppola and Lucas. Too artsy, weird stuff about sex and Jesus. They were really mad. They wanted to cancel the project, but they had spent too much on it. Mm-hmm. They did slash the marketing budget and basically do everything they could to make it where the film was a failure.
Why would they want the film to be a failure? It's their money that they're losing.
To teach future filmmakers not to do something creative.
Well, can't they just tell them to not do...
They did that this time and it didn't work.
Can't they just not greenlight future Lucas works or...
Yeah, but then they don't want any other director to ever try this again, basically.
Okay.
The film was not a total failure.
Yeah.
It made $2.4 million on its $770,000.77 budget. That's a 209% return on investment. That's not crazy big money anywhere. But for a film that was intentionally tried to not be marketed, that's pretty good. That's also only the U.S. returns. And it was considered a film for the 1970s that did surprisingly well overseas. As I understand it, it did pretty good in Japan. So the studio did not quite get their wish, only partially. The critical reception?
Well, presumably they would want to squash artsy films because they thought that they wanted to tell directors that artsy films would be squashed so that directors wouldn't try to release artsy films in future because the studio thought artsy films wouldn't do well. But if you just market your artsy films like your normal films, they actually can do well.
Yeah, it was almost like they were being controlled by some sort of media industrial complex that made them conform to these ideas that they didn't actually want and that would have been easy for them to defeat if they had just been open-minded enough to try. The film was pretty well received by critics. It has an 84% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. That's mostly newer reviews, but Roger Ebert gave it a good review when it first came out, and a lot of people really appreciated the very forward-thinking and documentary style that it tried to merge science fiction and this very extravagant foreign view of the world and make it relatable on a very basic human level. And there were compliments to the cinematography, and, I think we might forget just how weird and unique this would look, because this was one of the first times that experimental short film style cinematography, which we see a lot of in the mined prison scenes, these full bleak white shots. There's one of I think maybe my favorite shot of the movie is when Robert Duvall is first put into the prison and we just see him lying down flat against the white ground, perfectly bisecting the shot horizontally. It's really exciting and engaging, and it really makes you feel that feeling that Robert is feeling of despair and realizing that he's human in a world where he can't be human. And so it received good, if sometimes confused, reviews, initial reviews from critics.
Did it get a full theatrical release, or was it a limited art house
release? It did get a full theatrical release. And a lot of people did end up seeing the movie. It got put on the midnight run grunge drive-through circuit, which was pretty popular in the early 1970s. It was shown in a lot of double features as the weird movie after the normal movie. So it had some staying...
Genius marketing, by the way.
It had some staying power, even though it wasn't what we would call any box office smash. And there are a lot of filmmakers who cite seeing this movie as a teenager or as a young person that really expanded their mind and made them want to be filmmakers. Frank Darabont, the director of the prison movie, Shawshank Redemption, is a huge fan of this movie, and he said that going to see this movie at a drive-thru as the second movie at midnight when he was 12 is what made him realize that movies were a way that you could communicate really important ideas to the world, and made him want to be a filmmaker. And there are a lot of people who echo that sentiment.
So is it fair to say that of turn of the millennium filmmakers, you are either a THX 1138 director or a Tales of Hoffman director?
I mean, Tales of Hoffman director is for people who are making films in the 70s and 80s.
Okay.
So they're what generation apart. But again, I think we do see a similar experience of the weird movie that maybe we realize weird movies can be kind of cool.
Do something with color. Have something about color in your movie. Either all of it or none of it.
Both good options. It's gone on to be a well-respected movie, and a lot of people consider it a strong first effort from George Lucas. It also has people like me that really, really love the style, and even though it's made a little bit amateurishly, really, really enjoy it and think it's an insightful piece of social commentary. And it's now embedded itself in the culture, partially thanks to George Lucas, and he's now this major celebrity. And I don't know if you heard about this, but George Lucas is the guy who made Star Wars.
What?
Like a bunch of the ones, and the first 6 of them. So he's that guy. And so yeah, the production company, the THX sound, we've all heard of that. We saw the why does it say THX and make an sound at the beginning when they show that cool thing at the beginning of the movies? That THX and that sound is because George Lucas invented the sound technology that became standard in the theater, and it's named specifically for this film. There are some connections between here and Star Wars, not surprisingly. They're only made 6 years apart. The word Wookiee is originated in this film.
So did the studios have to cave and say, okay, George, you can have all of the money, given that your film that we tried to tank still did well?
Well, yes. So after Star Wars came out, and apparently George Lucas is good at making money, there was a 1977 re-release of THX 1138. This is actually, quote-unquote, the good version. Okay. Because it had some of the smaller edits we do see in the director's cut to kind of clean up the storytelling a little bit, and some of the image correction and image processing was improved there, but it doesn't have the extra CGI bits, the monkeys that attack him, the monkey people that attack him in the final sequence when he leaves the underground. Some of the weirder CGI stuff, which hasn't been received well, was not in the 1977 version, but George Lucas has made sure that that version is never going to be released on DVD or Blu-ray or anything, and he doesn't want us to see it. It was only available on obscure VHS tapes. So if you have an obscure THX 1138 1977 VHS tape, congratulations, you got the good one. So there are some connections between this movie and Star Wars. Not that surprising. They're only made 6 years apart. For example, the word Wookiee originates in this movie when, in the escape sequence, when they're chasing him in the car, one of the radio operators says, "I think I just ran over a Wookiee back there on the expressway." Wookiee here intended to be a totally nonsense word that can mean anything. It was apparently named for the actor's friend, Bill Wookiee, who drove him to the recording session. So he was making a joke about their drive. There's also a cutscene where THX falls into a garbage compactor that's slowly compressing him, and there's a monster in there. And they didn't have good monster effects, so they cut it, but they basically reused that scene in Star Wars. Didn't get any attention from the Oscars or the BAFTAs. Not industry approved.
So I did have a question, and maybe the answer is it's unclear. They never tell us. How does La get awakened?
Yeah, we don't know. Okay. This is not explained. We do not see La's awakening. We are to believe that La has been awakened through their own epiphany, through someone else's influence. I think if I had to guess, and what the story is trying to say, is that maybe like Logan's Run, that there is a chain of people, and that there's a subtle resistance movement that's out there. And, one of the things that I think really makes the world of THX so believable and engaging is that we have this tyrannical, dystopian, all-controlling society, but it's not totally successful. And the movie is actually all about showing the ways in which the society is really weak and ineffective and easy to overcome in its attempt to control everybody's lives. We constantly hear people talking about not doing drugs, about drug crime, which in this movie is not doing drugs. And people, we see people engaging in inappropriate sexual activity, and hear constantly about people reporting each other and trying to turn each other in. Our Sin character, who is something of a bad guy, he is introduced to us as the hacker who can control everything and has hacked his way to a superior rank and better quarters and all of this other stuff. So, it's not like there's total and complete a blanket control and no one has any opportunity to step outside the system. Really, anyone who tries at all to step outside the system basically succeeds. And even when the controllers hear about this, they a lot of times are too busy and they're over budget and they just don't have time to deal with it right now. So everybody knows that the system is easy to overcome, and anybody that wants to basically gets away with it. Well, again, this ties back to this idea that it's not that society is so authoritarian that people can control it in real 1970s life that George Lucas is talking about it, but that people who want to break free can break free. It's not that hard.
Well, Sen is also sort of cheating, but in a conformist way. Like, he is trying to achieve a nicer living situation and control.
He's playing with the system, not against the system. So, I think La we do not know. We specifically, it's too early in the film. We never see anything about her experience. The story of the film is about La freeing Thex. There's a lot of various stories and speculation about what the meaning and sources of these numbers and letters we put into the names come from.
Oh, someone's trying to decode this?
George Lucas said that THX 1138 was his student telephone number at USC, and that if you look at the numbers on the letters, and it all plays out, and that's where it came from.
So was there a student at USC who was in his old dorm who kept getting calls once this film came out?
That's a great question. Some critics have noted that THX kind of sounds like sex, and La kind of sounds like love, and Sin kind of sounds like sin.
Especially when you say it with your pin-pen merger. The first time you said it, I was like, our Sin character. Oh, the character associated with sin? Okay.
So it is sex, love, and sin which are able to collaborate together to break people free from their controlling society. And I don't know if we can say that's the origin of THX's name or not. The other ones sound like they kind of check out to me. So I don't know exactly where it's coming from.
Sen could also be associated with senator.
True.
I would cast this guy as like a Roman senator or an American senator.
I think he'd make a great Roman senator.
He's got the looks for it.
I mean, Donald Pleasance does a great job in this movie.
Yeah.
And he's doing a great job of being creepy and gross, but also kind of interesting and almost fun to be around. And it's worth noting that Donald Pleasance gave George Lucas a really hard time on the set and did not learn his lines and was basically kind of making a lot of it up as he went and had to be fed a lot of lines. So that sort of dynamic, bubbly, you don't quite know what he's going to do next feeling you get from Sin, that part's not acting.
And then the other question I had, you referred to La as Thex's wife. Is that term used in the film?
I don't think they do. I think they use the term mate.
Yeah, so we hear Thex when he's in his confessional with, unfortunately not Orson Welles, that he's like having trouble with his mate, or his mate is being weird or something. And the first time I heard that, I assumed this was mate as in like sex partner, spouse, some sort of term like that. But it also could be used to mean roommate.
Yeah.
We also hear about unsanctioned sexual activity.
That's right.
But it's unclear what that is. And
it appears to be any sexual activity that is not masturbation.
Okay. Well, how do they get new babies?
They grow them in a lab.
Okay, so it's
they
totally
show this at the end.
Artificial petri dish babies.
Yes. Okay. Now, one of the great crimes that sex and law commit is producing a child biologically, which is why law has to be executed. Okay.
I wasn't sure if they were still insemination was still internal and then just growth.
I don't think it's made super clear, but no, I don't think so.
Yeah. So I thought what was going on is that they have totally gender neutral co-ed housing situations because no one has a libido anyway. So La and Thex were not considered to be like romantic or sexual partners. And La gets Thex off the drugs because she wants to have sex with him. Because later, Sen says, do you want to be mates? Or possibly even roommates. And it was unclear to me whether I was supposed to parse this as a come on or just trying to get a very sanitary roommate.
Yes. His line, well, yes. First of all, I think you're totally right. I don't think that they're married or in some special romantic relationship. I think you're right that they're basically just roommates, and they established that against the rules. So I think your interpretation is totally correct. I was maybe being a little bit generous in my opening description. I also would have to think your interpretation, though, that it's a come on from Sin is correct. Okay. So I'm pretty sure the story we're seeing here is that, remember, so Sin and La are co-workers. Mm-hmm. They are they're controllers who get to monitor everybody. They work together in the control room, and so
which is mostly about drug distribution. They're the people inside people's medicine cabinets.
They make sure that everyone does their drugs and no one has sex. Mm-hmm. That's their job. And so Sin, we see a shot where Sin discovers that La and THX are having sex. Mm-hmm. So Sin figures out that La and THX are having sex, and he's like, great, THX sexually awakened now. Well, then I guess THX needs to move in with me. And so that's what he's saying.
So how did Sen get awakened? Did he also figure out how to stop taking his anti-libido pills?
I'm not confident that Sen is not taking the anti-libido pills. Okay. I think he might still be on them and is exploring this idea that he has now gained access to. Maybe he's not. Maybe he's not. But yeah, I think Sen, just as we said before, is someone who is supposed to be still playing by most of the rules. Mm-hmm. Is probably still taking the pills. Is probably not trying to necessarily escape from society, just trying to move his way up in it. And one of the ways he wants to move up in it is he wants a sexually awakened roommate to at least watch and enjoy in that way. So no, that is a come-on line when he says, you rate very highly in sanitation. I've checked. I do believe that is the intention behind that. Yeah, their relationship with sex is weird, and I don't know that this part of the movie, even though I think it's the theme of it and the idea of post-sex society and rebelling against that is a great theme to have in a film. It works great on cinema, and it's really overall well told here. So sex, of course, is not totally prohibited in this society. Mm-hmm. In fact, there are multiple pornographic channels for all of your variety of tastes, men, women, whatever else. And
violence,
that's right. And they're not shy about sexualizing the characters in the holograms. Mm-hmm. And there's also another addition to the director's cut is the robot device that Robert Duvall takes advantage of in that scene. There was no robot device in the original
scene. You gotta add the masturbation machine. That's what George wanted.
George Lucas spent $500,000 adding that 4 seconds of digital animation to the movie, probably. So, yes. And I actually think the inclusion of this is a really bad mistake and really cuts against the film. I think it would have been way better if it had just been a post-sex society, and it would have been way easier for the audience to digest you're not allowed to do anything sexy, and they give you pills that totally remove your libido. Because it is hard to understand exactly what's supposed to happen pharmacologically, where it gives you a libido so you can have sex. And I think George Lucas wants us to feel like, yeah, society is telling us that it's okay to have sex, but it's not okay to really love someone and to really have a connection. And I feel like we might be better just simplifying the point down to saying society doesn't want us to have sex or have loving connections. Maybe just grouping those together and making the bigger point would have been easier and more pointed.
Yeah, and if you take the machine out, then the sex content that he's watching in the holograms, like, kind of why is it there? It just sort of seems like it's there. It's like, oh, just another interesting thing to watch, just like beating people or funny car commercials.
That's not a commercial. That's supposed to be a comedy sketch. I mean, again, I think George Lucas is trying to parody television of his day. Yeah, what do people watch on television? They watch black people doing stereotypical jokes. They watch policemen hitting black people, and they watch sexy nude ladies. That's all television is nowadays. And George Lucas is leaning into that. And I don't know that that's the most original media commentary. It's not the worst media commentary either. But I think that asking the audience to parse exactly at what level they're controlling everybody's sexuality is not helping them understand what the movie is about, really.
One thing that I disliked about the film, so let me know if this was something added after the fact, is I think we just hear this in, off-screen audio. Is talking about, like, consumerism, like people are being pushed to buy things. But when we look in people's apartments, like, there are no things. Nobody owns anything. Nobody has this nice car.
Well, this is not added after the fact. Some of that stuff's in the original student film. Some of what I agree with you, is pretty lazy anti-consumerist sentiment in there. I think there's a couple factors we see. One thing is, we do know what happens to all the things that people buy from the commercials. They immediately throw them away. So there's a sequence where THX goes to Ohm and is given the immortal guidance, go buy something, you'll feel better. Yes. So then he goes to a store, he buys some nondescript widget, takes it home, unwraps it, sort of looks at it lovingly, and then immediately throws it in the trash. So again, we're getting the sense of society wants us to buy things as the pleasure of buying, and that's bad. You shouldn't want to buy things just for the pleasure of buying them. So the idea is that people are buying things from the commercials, they just all immediately throw them away because they don't actually care about owning something nice to have. They just care about the experience of buying something, and that's what's supposed to be great.
Okay, I totally forgot that this happened, and that may be our cat's fault. I did miss about 60 seconds of the visuals of this film because Nova wanted to stand in between me and the screen. And
I forgot about that.
That was really important to her.
I think that may have been around that time.
I thought it happened during the chase, but...
No, I think it was before that.
Okay.
Yeah, and we do see lots of cars during the chase, and we do get some...
I meant maybe the escape, when Cert and THX have gotten out of the prison, we've lost Sen, and they're running around in the stacks.
Because, when that's what the comedy skit that we see is all about, someone getting a fancy new car, and that does kind of strike us, I think, definitely at that time, because that's a very individualistic experience. It's supposed to be prohibited. I don't know exactly how we're supposed to fit that in. We do know from their conversations about Sen that Sen is a G34, which is some rank above them. So it's not a totally equal, this is not a communist dystopia.
Yeah.
There's not equal, you can get issued a better car or a worse car that people might be jealous about. And again, the director's cut is leaning more and more to this idea of that THX is maybe living in this very controlled, totally uniform place, but there are other places in this world outside of that. So I think that maybe some of what Lucas would tell you, I actually again think this is the worst vision of the film, and imagining it as a much more controlled environment, and maybe even changing the comedy skit in some way would have been better. We have to remember that it's actually because George Lucas really likes cool cars, and he wanted to have cool cars in this movie. That George Lucas's first student film is a 8-minute piece about people doing time trials at a motor race in the desert in California. And it is really, really great footage of fast cars driving around. So that's really what George Lucas considers himself an expert in, is taking photographs of cool cars. That he is a cool car photographer. He just happens to make okay movies. Yeah, in that scene, to give the film some credit, they're showing these, as he's flipping around on the hologram from the violence channel to the comedy channel to the sex channel, and this is made at a time when there are no different channels for different types of entertainment. Mm-hmm. This would be there are only a few channels on TV, and they're all general channels. They don't have types of channels. So George Lucas is inventing cable TV. He's trying his best.
One more thing about sex being illegal. Maybe I read this wrong, but to me, it seems like when they are in the prison, there is a sexual assault.
Yes.
So do you stop taking the pills when you're in prison?
It's kind of implied that this assaulter is either not on their pills, or maybe they seem to be perhaps pill resistant. I think it's also, this is a very dark subject, but it's also implied that his actions are not driven by his libido.
Okay,
that
so
he is an abuser,
violence,
that he's looking to assault someone, to violate somebody, and that I don't think we're supposed to actually interpret that as a particularly erotic or sensual experience for that person. Do you think that it seems clear that THX is our protagonist?
Yeah.
Is he a hero? Let me push against that idea for a second, because he's escaping to freedom and to some extent helping other people escape with him. Is THX's desire to escape, is this an ideological rebellion? Is he open-minded now and he's desiring freedom? Or is he just following very natural, very base instinct? Is he just another rat in the cage responding to a stimulant in a different way? Or do you think there is something admirable, heroic about his journey?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we want THX to do is and what would happen in a film made in 2012 would be he takes down the government and he destroys it, and everything's
like in Logan's Run.
Yeah, or in 1976. Although, well, we'll get to how successful they are with taking down the government in Logan's Run.
There's some questions about that ending.
So yeah, he is acting kind of selfishly. I would interpret this as the point is in a society that is so oppressive, it is impossible to be a hero.
But you do see
you have to have really small goals, which can just be your own liberation. And if you try to bring somebody else with you, that's too big of a project and you're going to get caught and stopped.
That's just sort of what happens with him in Sin. And he has to drop Sin because he can't. Sin is not organized. He's not driven enough as a person. He gets too easily distracted.
He's also not good enough at running. He gets tired with the running.
Yeah, he's not prepared for the march across the white expanse.
Yeah, at one point he says when they're walking through the white void, I think the air is getting lighter,
or heavier.
The air is getting lighter or heavier, and I'm like, I think you're just out of shape. Yeah. I think you just aren't good at running.
Well, I think Sin has never engaged in exercise in his entire life. I think he's never done it. So this is a very foreign experience for him. I guess THX is just a natural athlete.
He's moving. He's doing a little bit of light cardio. I don't know how hard it is for him to move those robot arms.
Yeah, who knows what experience he's going through when he's mind linked up in there.
Yeah.
But you do see THX's decision to rebel as meaningful and not merely instinctual. You do think that he is engaging in some sort of ideological awakening. Is he now anti-control society? Is that how we should see this character at the end of the movie? Is he against it?
I think he thinks it's bad, and he's specifically, it's bad for me because I found out and they're going to kill me.
I see. So this is fundamentally driven by his own libido and his own fear of repression.
I think he does have an awakening, but that's not actually related to his actions. His actions are in the interest of personal safety.
I think that maybe resolves the dilemma, because he does appear to have an awakening, but I agree with you that the awakening is not really what's driving his behavior. It's almost coincidental.
The awakening is what's driving the state's behavior.
Yeah. My favorite character in the movie is the state. And I love how through this background narration, and we're constantly seeing numbers and papers float across the scene, we can experience in this very documentary style the story of what's happening on the other side of the camera. You know, the end of the film, there is a literal ex machina that saves THX. It's not a deus ex machina. It is the machine itself just basically stops chasing him at the crucial moment. And they're almost caught up to him. They could just about get him. But then throughout the film, we've been getting this budget tracker.
Yeah.
You know you got a cool, fun movie when you got budget tracker accounting action sequences.
Like in Taxi Driver, David loves it when you just watch a number go up.
That's actually pretty fair.
Recommend your number go up movies in the comments, please.
Better than the movies that just show you one number and it never goes up over and over again. Not as good. So we're told from the beginning, once THX makes an escape, that there's a budget on his recapture project. And at the beginning of the movie, they were getting lots of positive feedback forms from the overseers telling us that they're under budget and everything's going to plan, so that's very good. And we're told as the number starts to go up that, okay, well, there is a limit. Any project that goes over 5% budget has to be canceled. Now, towards the end of the movie, in the big car chase scene, as they start crashing into things, the budget goes way over 5%. It goes like over 25% over the original budget. But the project does not immediately stop. And some people have commented on this and said, like, oh, there's an error in the movie.
It's a plot hole.
They didn't do the math right. I think this is a totally incorrect interpretation. Again, the whole point of the movie is that nobody is following the rules. The system is not effectively self-regulated. People, like Sin tells us...
Do you think that means that the people in charge of this project can't do math?
No, I mean the people in charge of the project are covering up that it's over budget and are trying to get the job done and get a positive feedback score before anyone figures out that they're committing accounting fraud. Mm-hmm. So at a certain point, and I think we know this because the number goes up and up, it goes way higher than it should be. And then at the end, when the robots are feet away from grabbing onto THX on the ladder, they announce that the project is now too far over budget and it's going to be canceled and they're just going to let THX escape. And when they announced this, they announced the final budget of the project as way under the numbers they've been counting before, right at 5%.
So I think that's it for THX. The other film in this double feature was Logan's Run, which is a 1976 film directed by Michael Anderson, written by David Zelig Goodman, William F. Nolan, related to Christopher Nolan?
Nope.
Okay. And George Clayton Johnson. It stars Michael York as Logan, Jenny Agutter as Jessica, Richard Jordan as Francis, Roscoe Lee Brown as Box. And just a brief note, no one's named Roscoe anymore. This is a problem. I think it's a great name.
Maybe it's out of respect for Mr. Lee Brown.
I think he wouldn't mind if people were naming their kids after him. That's generally considered an honor. Farrah Fawcett as Holly, here listed as Farrah Fawcett Majors. I assume she was married to somebody.
She was married to Lee Majors, really big actor at the time. He was the $6 million man.
Okay. Michael Anderson Jr., yes, that is the son of the director, as Doc, and Peter Ustinov as Old Man.
So, Logan's Run is an adaptation of a book, pretty popular book in the 60s, which had the same core concept of the film. That it's a future utopia where there's only young people and everyone has to die when they get old. In the book, they had to die when they're 21, not 30.
Oh, that's very young.
So that's pretty young. And they didn't die through carousel. The whole carousel thing is totally invention of the film. They died. They just went to a sleep shop and they gave them happy drugs and they died. In the book, there's a much bigger sequence after they get out of the Crystal City, and they have a whole trek across the United States. I think they're on the other side, and then eventually they escape into space, and Sanctuary is a space station on Mars.
That's quite different.
So there's a lot of stuff going on.
Very
in the book.
Expensive.
Yeah, I did not think that was going to happen. The Old Man is a revision combination of characters from the book. In the book, there's this mysterious figure, Ballard, who is like the resistance underground leader, and everyone speaks of him in secret whispers. And then it later turns out that he is the Sandman partner of Logan, but also he's secretly 45, and he's been using plastic surgery from the doc to age him down. And then when they get out, he's like, I'm also on the outside. I'm everywhere. I'm Ballard.
So is Francis not in the book? Because Francis is Logan's partner in the book.
Neither
in the film.
Francis and the Old Man are one character in the book.
Okay.
Would be the best way to think about it. I've not read the book. So originally this movie was going to be released in 1969, which I think makes more sense. That is right after Planet of the Apes and 2001: A Space Odyssey came out. So these are the sci-fi was so hot right now, especially weird, kooky sci-fi stuff. And there are definitely sequences in the movie that are direct references to both of those movies. The scene of them walking around the ruins of Washington, D.C. and discovering the weathered Abraham Lincoln statue is a pretty clear reference to the Statue of Liberty sequence in Planet of the Apes. The 1968 adaptation went into production hell and didn't actually happen. Robert Redford did not make that movie. And the 1974 version was based on a rewrite that came from Stanley R. Greenberg, the author of Soylent Green, which, if you like Logan's Run, you might want to check out Soylent Green. That has William Shatner in a story about the evils of global warming and overpopulation, somewhat similar themes. And it wasn't until Goodman came in after that version that the age of death was raised from 21 to 30. And that's when they said, okay, this movie is doable. We can do it at 30. 21 wasn't going to happen.
We can actually get famous actors. Also, if we're going to raise the age to 30, why not raise it to 35 so that Michael York might plausibly actually be playing this character?
Yes, Michael York is 34 as we're filming this, and he looks about like he's 34. It looks like a very healthy 34-year-old person. I know what you mean. I mean, there's a real answer to that question, which is this is supposed to be a reference to the popular counterculture saying don't trust anyone over 30. Mm-hmm. And that was a very catchphrasey idea that people would have recognized, and I think it's supposed to be a direct reference to that. So I think it was the right choice to pick 30 as the age. That's doable. That's the reference people are going to get. Totally on board with that. I think Michael York does a very good job in this movie. I'm happy to play ball, but yeah, he looks too old, and maybe some other casting choices might have been better. I think that's understandable. Michael York is responsible for Farrah Fawcett being in the movie. So Farrah Fawcett Majors starred in this movie before she was famous. This is a year before, or the same year, depending on how you look at it, that Charlie's Angels comes out and all the other things. So Farrah Fawcett was just playing tennis at a club in LA, and Michael York went to that club to play tennis and was like, Farrah Fawcett is really attractive. Michael Anderson, you should put her in this movie. I have no idea if she does acting, but she should be in your movie.
Yeah, I wouldn't say she delivered the greatest performance I've ever seen.
Yeah, I've never been a big fan of Farrah Fawcett. Personally, that's fine. And you can tell all of her dialogue is 80-yard, and I don't really think that she's being asked to do any acting in this movie in her defense.
She really thinks he would look better with dark hair.
She is convincing. I mean, we did connect with her character. Her character had a motivation. We knew what that motivation was. And then later on, when she brings it up after they're captured by the children or by the rebels, she sticks to it, and I believe her. So I think I give her a thumbs up, personally. Now, we got to talk about the carousel sequence, because the story of the creation of this as a film is so controlled by this carousel sequence, which is the part at the beginning where they fly up into the air. And this was really, really difficult and really, really expensive. This movie has a $9 million budget, and a significant fraction of that budget went to producing the carousel sequence at the beginning.
Was $9 million, where is that for the mid-70s?
That's expensive. Okay. That's not cheap. That's too expensive.
Okay.
That's dozens of millions, certainly, in modern terms. It's difficult to compare because we spend more on movies now, but that's over budget for this type of movie. And a lot of it, again, came from this carousel sequence, which they didn't think was going to be quite so expensive from the beginning, but they kept trying to do it over and over again and discovering new problems. Several times, they tried to film the sequence, brought all the stunt people up on the wires, and the wires got crossed, and people got caught up, and they started going around people in extremely dangerous ways, and they had to cancel the whole thing, bring in a bunch of rescue cranes, and by hand manually untangle all of the actors' lines from each other's bodies. So it was extremely dangerous and extremely difficult, and they had to do it many, many times until they got a version that they were satisfied with. And they had to build a lot of new custom technology to make this happen. They had to build a new idea of how to do rigs, where instead of having one suspension point that all of the actors were hanging from. Each actor had their own independent suspension point, so they couldn't get captured with each other, and they couldn't figure out how to do the shots they wanted to do from below. So they rebuilt the whole set upside down with the crystal ceiling recreated on the floor, and then shot those sequences with from above the actors as if they were hanging down on top. That's all of the individual shots. Okay. that
so they didn't want to get the rig in the shot.
Right.
Okay. And matte paintings, they hadn't heard of those.
That wouldn't look cool enough.
It's just black. No. They used matte paintings in this film.
And they built a custom camera with the widest field of view of any cinematic camera that had ever been built before, that was adapted to fit the circular space that they were in, so the fisheye effect would happen, but it would be perfectly canceled out by the circular space, and it would look flat. So this was incredibly difficult. This was incredibly expensive, and they basically had to spend months at the end of the production recreating the scene over and over again to finally get it captured. Just to be clear, this is about 40 seconds of content in the film?
I think it's a little bit more.
Okay, maybe it's a minute. So yeah, where'd all the money go? That's where it went.
And also they make people explode is the other factor. There's like fireworks going off on the stunt people.
Yeah, a lot of firework stunts in this movie. For example, the guns that they used little explosive things that they shoot out, and they also really didn't work a lot. And the actors said that it was a horrible experience to do anything involved with the guns because they were dangerous, they would pop off in your hand, they would not work, they would land somewhere and you couldn't see the effect, and the actors just hated doing anything with the guns and didn't want anything to do with it. And frankly, you can see that in the acting. The actors are constantly looking at the guns with a sense of unease and disgust. They're holding them kind of away from their body, pointed in the opposite direction. Like, I don't respect this thing and I don't want anything to do with it. A lot of work was put into the costumes of that carousel sequence as well, with their flamed, unitard racing suits?
Yeah, that's not what I assumed they would have been wearing based on what I had seen of the film so far.
It distinctly doesn't look anything like what everyone else is wearing, which is these sort of flowing robes, which are color-coded based on the age group that they're in. Apparently, this was a big point of confusion with audiences when the film was first released. Why are they all wearing different colors clothes? And people did not connect the color of the hand gems to the color of the clothes and thought it was just weird.
I don't think the hand gems are colored. I think the hand gems are all red.
They are. They're not all red.
Okay.
When you're in your 20 to 25, you have a green gem, and 18 to 20, you have a blue gem. So depending on what age group you're in, you get a different color gem on your hand, and you also wear a different color.
Are you sure that's what the age brackets are? Because Logan says at some point, when he gets told that he's going to die, he says, I'm R6. I still have 4 years left.
R6 is for red 6.
So I assume that means he's been red for 6 years.
Yeah, but red doesn't mean you're going to die. Red means you're going to die in red doesn't mean you're about to die. It means you're going to die in the next 4 years. When it's flashing red, that means it's last day.
I know. So he's R6. I'm assuming that 6 means the number of years he has been red.
No, I think it's just like a level of red.
Okay. So the number after the color is meaningless.
I don't know what it means, but I agree that it wouldn't fit. It does not mean he's been red for 6 years.
Yeah, I mean, so, and one other quick thing I want to clarify. Do you die on your 30th birthday? Sorry, get renewed. Do you get renewed on your 30th birthday or on your 31st birthday?
It's your 30th birthday.
Okay.
A lot of work went into the costumes, and it was a big costume budget on the film. Originally, all of the costumes that everyone was going to be wearing were going to be much more revealing, more along the lines of Jenny Aguter's lime green shimmering gown.
She's got 2 different lime green gowns, both of which are on the more revealing side.
They're very nice designs. They look great. And originally everybody was going to be dressed like that. And they didn't do it because putting that much skin on screen looked really weird, and they couldn't afford all of the skin makeup they needed to cover all of the extras, so they had to go with the more conventional costumes.
Also, some of the extras are minors.
I don't know that that's true. I believe you.
I saw some of them.
I mean, there is the child rearing zone.
Right. I think even outside, I think you go out into the real world when you're 16, and there were some extras who to me definitely looked like 16, 17.
Michael York's lounging caftan has gotten a lot of attention. People are fans of it. I think it looks great. I wish I had that caftan. And it was a last-second addition to the film. Originally, he was going to do that whole sequence in his standard Sandman uniform, but then when they built his home set, they were like, well, it's so homey, he should be wearing home clothes. So the costume designer made it right there, the hour that they were going to shoot it. He said he was very proud of it. And Michael York kept that caftan for several years in his personal collection.
Okay.
Peter Ustinov's costume as the old man also got a lot of attention. One fact that the costume designers were really sad did not show on the screen, so I want to give them their due, is that the buttons on his coat and stuff are little pennies, little United States pennies. So he found all the pennies and decided to make buckets.
How did he adhere the pennies to his coat?
I don't know. We can't see them very well. I wish we could see them, and then we could answer the question.
Did he drill through pennies?
I don't know. Maybe he found some future glue that you can glue them on really good, and just put a little dab of future glue on the back.
Yeah, that world looks like it would definitely have super glue.
He must have found this future glue. He scavenged future glue, and the one thing he was going to use it for was these penny buttons.
Okay.
Because he's a baller.
Was the 1970s penny the same as the modern penny?
I think it was pretty similar.
Okay, so it's Lincoln on it.
I think it's Lincoln. Yeah, okay. yeah. Yes. Peter Ustinov improvised almost all of his dialogue in the film. So that was just what he thought would have been fun and clever, and boy, did he do a great job.
So there were lines written, but he was like, no, I got this.
Peter Ustinov and Michael Anderson have worked together a lot.
Okay.
This is their 5th movie that they've done together. Okay. Peter Ustinov is kind of his guy. So my impression is that he sort of told Peter about the basic idea, and Peter said, I'll come up with something. And he did.
Yeah, Michael and Jenny did seem kind of a little bit more lost in their scenes with him than they did in their other scenes. Like, they weren't sure quite what to say next.
I see. You believe that, well, he was making it up. That's fine. And the cats in the Peter Ustinov scene, they lived on the set. Mm-hmm. They were the set cats. So everyone got to be with the kitties when they went into work. And that's why they were really very comfortable with all the actors. Yeah. So,
David, I think we've done a really great job of convincing people that this is a movie review podcast when it is actually an animal labor rights podcast. Mm-hmm. I think this was a great use of cats. Cats do not want to do specific things at specific times. That's not what they're into. So this is just the cats get to be there, do whatever they want. Sometimes they get a little pet. And sometimes they don't get enough of a little pet, and that can be somewhat frustrating. But I think acceptable working conditions.
Yes, there is the sequence where Michael York, in the script, reaches out and gives absentmindedly pets a little stroke of love for the cat. And the cat is not having this, and is now all upon Michael York. Why did you stop petting the kitty? What is wrong with you? I totally agree with you, and I think it's one of the best use of actors in film, because it is so thoughtful to the way the animals are behaving and integrates them well. There is one shot I don't like, which is when Logan and Francis are having their big fight with the American flag. Mm-hmm. There's one point where we see a cat dart away. It's a weird cut, and you can tell what happened is they threw the cat basically at the fighters. Mm-hmm. I don't think the cat was injured or truly horribly traumatized by this. Cats are very good at landing, and the cat landed and ran away because somebody threw at it. But they clearly threw it at them as they were wrestling on the ground. I didn't love that moment of it, but other than that, it was pretty great.
So the flagpole got thrown at the cat?
No, this is after they're done with the flagpole, when they're rolling around on the ground. And as they're rolling it around...
Someone off camera threw a cat just for drama.
Yes.
Guys, you didn't need that. I don't even remember it happening.
Yeah, it's not... They have to make you not see them throw in the cat, they have to do this kind of weird cut where the cat is just sort of suddenly there and runs off. So it's half as long as it should be. It doesn't look that great. Should have not done that part. That was a mistake.
Leave the kitties alone.
Leave the kitties alone. There was a planned to be a much bigger fight scene. There's sort of a moment where Jenny and Farah are struggling with each other, and originally there was a full big...
In the surgery scene?
There was a full... That fight was mainly going to be about Jenny and Farah, Holly and Jessica having a bit of their own cat fight, shall we say. But in the rehearsals for the fight, they're not trained fighters, and they kept doing it in a way that was injuring each other, especially pulling each other's hair too hard. Mm-hmm. And then they started actually really fighting in the rehearsal scene, so we had to cut it from the movie. A lot was cut out of this movie. There was a 4-minute long scene in the Love Box where we really got to appreciate all the fun stuff that was going on in there.
Yeah, I felt like we spent sufficient time in the love box with what we had. I'm not sure what we would have done with an extra 4 minutes.
I could guess what we would have done, but I know what you mean. There was also a totally another scene where they go separately to the hallucimill shop and have some fun drug times before they get to the scary part. So we also had to cut that a bit. Richard Nixon would have been mad. And there was also a lot cut from the infamous box ice fish plankton protein from the sea scene. There was a much longer and more complicated sequence where Logan and Jessica had to pretend to be nude ice sculptures, and apparently the camera was very interested in what they looked like in detail, all the different parts of them as a nude ice sculpture. That part actually, this movie scored really well with test audiences, except for that part. So they had to cut it.
Also, you guys may be interested to know that this movie is rated PG, despite there being breasts on camera. I'm wondering if that would have bumped him up to an R.
Yeah, I don't know at what point they were in the censorship process, but it seemed like the MPAA's stance at the time was as long as the nudity is not the focus and is not sexual in nature. Jessica she's wearing that sheer gown, and she is not wearing anything else, but that's fine. And
yeah, well, at one point she takes it off because it's too cold.
That's right. In that ice scene, at the beginning, they have to take off their clothes because those clothes are too wet and too cold, so we need to change into these furs momentarily. The film was not the financial success that they had hoped, despite good box office numbers. It made $25 million. It was a cultural phenomenon at the time. It was considered popular, very hip, very cool, very in tune with the ideas that were prevalent in youth culture. But it only ended up making 178% in total profit because the production costs were way higher than they were supposed to be. Now, there are a lot of things that contributed to the production costs. All of these sets were built, in many cases, at full human scale, and these are some massive, extravagant, very impressive-looking sets. This is a movie with lots of practical effects, lots of saturated color shots, and some really big sequences that really show off the sets. So, did we love this film?
So it's good.
Okay,
yes.
We did it. Check. We got it. Great.
Also, this film's still not as saturated as Tales of Hoffman. There's a little sort of misty haziness over it.
That's fair. I mean, it's very saturated, but there is haze on top.
And can I get you to admit that this is more saturated than The Green Knight, which you tried to pitch me as a saturated color film?
There are no shots in this that are like the red skull in The Green Knight, or like the opening moments where we see colors flashing on top of him. Right, but they're not fully saturating the screen. I mean, there are shots in The Green Knight that are all one literal vibrant cover.
Yeah, there's like 3 shots in The Green Knight where it's all
there are
vibrant
no
color.
100% vibrant color shots in this movie.
Mustard yellow can never be fully saturated. Mustard yellow definitionally has brown in it.
Michael Anderson, the director of Logan's Run, is probably most well-known, other than being the father of Michael Anderson Jr., who stars as a doctor in this, probably most well-known for directing Around the World in 80 Days.
The David Niven one?
Yes, the David Niven one, a 1956 film, which also does have really striking color. So I think you can see that this is a 50s director who's eager to bring the really engrossing and vibrant color scheme to this movie, and I think it's great. I love seeing that, and I think it makes the movie fun to watch. I mean, it makes watching even films like Around the World in 80 Days, which is not as interesting as this story is in all sorts of different ways, but just looking at the great color scheme is a very pleasant experience. They also built full-size working cars for the maze sequences with electric motors that could actually drive around. Again, only used for about 45 seconds in the film, but they built them. Critical reception was not as positive. It only got a 58% rating. A lot of people thought it was too silly. And it was nominated for 3 Academy Awards, including Production Design and Cinematography. It won the Academy Award for Special Effects, sort of.
Oh.
It won the Academy Award in a tie with the King Kong remake that also came out in 1976. And originally the committee that selected the special effects award did not think that any movies that came out that year were deserving of an award and didn't want to award it in protest. And then the Oscar committee basically took over and said, well, we're going to give it as a tie then, if you're not going to pick anybody. We'll just give it to the 2 highest budget ones, basically. And then the Oscar Special Effects Committee resigned in protest and refused to work with the Oscars again, and they had to find new people to do it. So it did win an Oscar for special effects, but at what cost?
Mm-hmm. I mean, if the special effects people are going to say neither this nor the King Kong deserves an award, it is better to give no award, then maybe boot him.
You're with the Academy?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying these are the greatest special effects I've ever seen, but I'm not going to be like, you know what? Doing no award is such a big deal that you're saying all of these films are truly horrendous in terms of their special effects. And that's not true.
Yeah, some of the special effects in this movie are very fun and interesting. Some of them are silly, like the parts where they jump from the high rocks into the river. Just like Princess Mononoke, more kind of weird high jumping from rocks sequences. I think we're overdoing those. But yeah, well, good news. They all got fired. The film went on to have a pretty meaningful cultural impact. Again, this was kind of hot and cool. There was a TV show for kids. A kids TV show.
Okay.
There was a comic series.
About dying at 30.
For kids. Mm-hmm. A kids comic series. So this was really popular among people ages 10 to 14. People to ages 10 to 14.
Imagine if mom and dad were dead.
It has a 6.8 rating on IMDb with 64,000 votes. And this has gone on to be one of the most parodied films of all time. People, if you haven't seen it, you might not recognize it, but there are a lot of jokes about this movie. It's been featured multiple times on Family Guy as an example of weird 70s sci-fi movie. It had a Community episode that was largely inspired by other dystopian movies. So you've seen references to this movie. They're out there. And it's also had some effect on the fashion. And Mick Jagger, for example, is a really big fan of the couch that Logan has in his apartment, the multi-level terraced leather couch. And he apparently buys a copy of that couch and puts it in all of his houses. So all of his houses feature that couch because he thinks it's so cool. Yeah, with THX 1138, one thing we kind of skipped over a little bit was that THX 1138 is kind of the first modern cyberpunk movie. Mm-hmm. Cyberpunk meaning a movie about hardware and software uniting to control humans. And I mean, you could maybe go back to like Metropolis. That's kind of that. Or Alphaville from 1964. But THX 1138 is basically the first cyberpunk film. I'm not quite sure if we would call... normally people say the first cyberpunk film is Westworld from 1973. Mm-hmm. I don't know, but I think THX would stand out as something that came before that. I don't know if you'd call this cyberpunk. It definitely has the cyber plot elements. I might call it cyber glam instead of cyberpunk. Yeah,
it definitely doesn't have the cyberpunk aesthetics. I think you're allowed to take a genre and then mix up the aesthetics to make a point. That's totally fine. And I think, part of what they're saying in this film is that it seems like this is a utopia. It seems like everything is fun in this world as opposed to in the THX world. But it is in fact still bad.
Yeah, again, this is made in an age where there aren't cyberpunk conventions that you're necessarily supposed to follow. So it doesn't even realize that it's not playing the game as it's expected. So I have an answer or a thought, but I'm curious about yours. Why do they kill everyone over 30? Why do you think they do it? I think there's a clear answer that's right and other answers are wrong. And that is that the idea is that they kill everyone over 30 because people over 30 are judgmental and controlling. Mm-hmm. It's not, as sometimes I think people get the impression of, that like they need to eat them all for food. That's Soylent Green, different movie. And it's not because they don't want to share the resources with them. They have unlimited resources. They have more than enough medical technology to go around. I think the movie clearly presents it as this is a socio-political problem. Again, referencing the countercultural issues of its time, that young people want to have sex and do drugs, and old people, for some reason, just don't like that. And you'll never fix that. Old people are always crotchety and judgmental. So, if we want to have a society that you're allowed to do fun stuff, Sadly, we have to
kill
pick.
all the old
kill
people.
all old people, or
and old is 30,
kill all people over 30, or have a society where you're allowed to do fun things. You're never gonna get both, Libby. You just can't do it.
Yeah, one theory I had is that they're killing old people. They're killing people once they hit 30 because when you're old, you're ugly, and we need everything to be perfect and beautiful in this society.
I do think that's a theme of the film, but I don't think that's the practical
Old people
reason.
are ruining the aesthetic. And another theory is that once you get older and, maybe you have a decline in your libido, you maybe start to think about bigger things than your own immediate pleasure. And people over 30 are more likely to try to fight against this society that's been created.
Yeah, I think it is that second point. That is the primary reason. I think
they're
both are there.
They're going to figure it out. Yeah.
One is just sort of a general, old people, gross, ew. But also that they're trying to create a society ruled by young people. It's interesting that there doesn't seem to be any sort of socio-political environment at all. In THX, we hear about elections, and even though it's a very controlled society, we do get some idea about how it's fit together, and there are overseers, and people make decisions. But it seems like this is a totally AI-driven society. And that's something that's different in the Logan's Run future from the THX future, is that now we have our AI overlord, whereas THX is a sort of more, still software-driven, but fundamentally it's humans making the decisions. It might be say it's really a mechanical world, not a digital world. Is AI the real villain? Is the AI the villain of this story?
So it wasn't totally clear to me that there was no one, the announcement that we hear over the loudspeaker that the carousel is starting and so everyone in this age class assemble. Is that an actual human saying that over the loudspeaker, or are we meant to interpret that as
I think that's the AI.
some sort of text
I think
to
that's
speech?
the same voice they give to the AI when the AI is interrogating Logan in his mind, doing the multi-Logan interrogation. Surrogation, excuse me. Surrogation.
Okay. So Siri is running the world. Okay. Yeah, I think the villain of this piece is dead people, is whoever made this happen in the first place. So they do mention at some point there was a great disaster, which I think, given this is a 1976 film, we are meant to assume is nuclear war, that killed almost everything, all life outside of these orbs, or that killed most life, and now people have migrated into these
Crystal cities.
Crystal cities. Into Crystal City, Virginia.
Where the film appears to be set. I think that Crystal City is not a joke, because geographically the film is basically set near where Libby and I are currently staying, in an area called Crystal City, and I do not think that's a coincidence.
Yeah, Crystal City is a neighborhood in the city of Alexandria, which is right across the Potomac from Washington, D.C., where we know they end up.
Yeah.
You don't have to walk along a beach in order to get there, which you do in the film, which now that you've said that the book involves them walking across the United States and then going into space, maybe seems like they needed to preserve some of that.
They had to do the walking along the beach sequence because that's what's in Planet of the Apes, so they had to put that in the trailer. And I think the idea is they walk east from Crystal City, hit the Chesapeake, and because that's where they're sort of coming out. So the journey from Crystal City to the Chesapeake is an underground journey. And then they're sort of following the drainage lines of the city out. And then they come out at the Chesapeake and walk from there.
And follow the Potomac.
So I think
they have a little bath in the Potomac.
That's right.
Jumping off a cliff that does not exist there. The same crimes as Pocahontas, not knowing about how... I'm a Virginian, if you can't tell. Not knowing about Virginia.
Not a lot of big cliffs overlooking lakes in Virginia. That's just not how it works.
Not Eastern Virginia.
Yeah.
We don't have those.
Yeah.
Anyway, what was I saying? Oh, yeah. So, whoever did the nuclear war, those are probably the bad guys. And then whoever was okay, now we're going to take the survivors and set up this kind of city. Those are the bad guys. But we don't actually see any of those people.
So not Francis. Francis is a victim here. He's not a villain.
I think mechanically, in terms of the plot, Francis is serving as an antagonist, but I find it hard to blame him. One thing that I think both of these films are kind of underestimating is how not normal humans would be when they are not being raised by other humans. In both of these films, babies are immediately taken away from their parents. In THX, they're not even grown inside their mama. They appear to be raised by robots.
That's
in
right.
THX.
I think
in
for
the
both,
cathedral,
we got to say they're raised by THX. They're raised by monks.
Okay.
The kids are so I think they're raised by monks in THX. In Logan's Run, they're definitely raised by robots. Everybody's too busy at the sex parties.
Yeah. They at least have like interaction with other children. But like if that's like babies aren't going to learn to talk if they aren't being constantly spoken at.
Both of these movies are definitely influenced by the literature, dystopian literature that precedes it in the first half of the 20th century. We're talking, of course, about 1984, but I think especially Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, which has a big influence on both of these. The idea of, in THX, of drugs being distributed to society to control people. This same idea we get in Logan's Run of children being separated, and this revulsion of biological parenting, I think is supposed to be a direct reference to Brave New World, which I think is a great book. If you like these movies, you should check out Brave New World. It's actually pretty good.
Yeah. Is there a Brave New World film?
There's not a Brave New World film. Actually, there is. It's called Logan's Run, is my answer to that question, because that's basically what we're... Less so with THX. I think THX is creating its own world. Logan's Run is basically Brave New World.
Okay.
I don't know whether it's not a Brave New World film. I've been thinking about this for years. It's hard to film. I think I wouldn't want to make it as a movie. Are either of these films coming-of-age stories? In both films, people become more mature. And in Logan's Run, we're explicitly comparing the sort of youthful behavior that they're in their society, and then they get to realize and think about more adult things, like how only you should have monogamy and you got to be focused on having babies and stuff like that. So does that count?
Yeah. So THX, not a coming of age story. The focus is not on THX's awakening, even though that does happen. The focus is on his escape. And physically escaping from confinement is not a lesson of adulthood. Logan's Run, I am like willing to interpret as a societal coming of age story. Like
it's a coming of age story for everybody.
Everyone is a child, and then they see Peter Ustinov's lovely lined face and come of age.
They touch his lovely lined face. Actually, I really love the sequence at the end where the girl comes out and touches the old man's face. I think it's genuinely touching, and it's great cinematography. I'm going to give a shout out to Ashley Cox, who is her only role in the film is as the timid girl, as she is called, touching the old man's face, and I think she really kills that role. It is kind of a weird scene, I have to say, because the world is exploding behind them. People seem very unconcerned about all of their friends dying. Basically, 1% of this community has escaped, and they're fine with that.
But there's this cool old guy. Yeah, one thing that I think would have been done differently if this film had been made in like the last 15 years would be that the people in the carousel that's going on when Logan and Jessica get back, those people would also have been saved. We wouldn't have seen people in that carousel also starting to explode. Logan would have been able to save them all.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think to some extent it's, 1970s, we love our disaster movies. We love our casual action sequences. And I think we really do suffer from some of that here. We got to have giant explosions at the end, even though we're not really prepared to invest in that tone. And again, like these water jumping scenes, there's just these... Everyone is an action hero all of a sudden in ways that don't really make sense.
One way that did make sense was the fight between Logan and Francis in the Capitol.
It's a pretty good fight.
Which I thought was an extremely good fight.
Pretty nice. For a kind of cinematic, I might say 1930s style
throwdown.
It
did remind me of Scaramouche.
Yep. But they embraced that. That was the aesthetic that they were going for, and they did do a good job. Yeah. But yeah, when the city's being destroyed, it's not just the people who are up on the wires who explode, as they're sort of supposed to. We just see... The whole city's collapsing. Yeah. People fall off of a balcony. People get crushed by things. But again, the escapees just don't really seem to care.
I mean, possibly one sign of this society being broken. They can't even imagine sadness. They've only experienced pleasure their whole life.
Yeah, I do think maybe more in THX 1138. But there is a kind of Plato's Cave effect here, which I think is done really... engrossingly, and really, I would use these movies as a way to explain to people the idea of a Plato's Cave, because these people have been stuck in these largely underground societies where they only get to see the sort of vague representations of the things that inspired them. Like the people in THX world, they don't know who Jesus is. Mm-hmm. They don't really understand where these styles of comedy that they're seeing on screen come from or what they're referencing. But they when they escape and they return to their more real, natural lives, they are going to see and they're going to understand the background behind those ideas. So I do think it's a direct and intentional but effective use of the Plato Caves analogy, which is thrown around so much and used incorrectly.
Yeah. Yeah, when Logan and Jessica first see the sun, they're just really confused. Mm-hmm. What if warm on my face?
Well, they look straight at it for a while, which is not the best
So
choice.
they are going to get cataracts in their old age.
I think that Logan Run's shot, I mean, it's a bit of an obvious sequence, but I do think it's a reference to THX 1138. Uh-huh. I mean, that's the big closing, and I think pretty sure that they saw THX 1138, and they expected a lot of the audience to have seen that, mm-hmm. and it's an intentional reference.
I did have a question for you. Is it ever established what exactly everyone thinks is going on when people renew? Because they talk about renewal as like you die and are reborn. What they see is people going up in the carousel and like their bodies explode. Do they think, and everyone's like chanting renew, it's very exciting. It's unclear to me whether they understand that people are dying. Like, is renewal like reincarnation? Your body is destroyed, but your soul goes into one of these babies that we've grown? Or do they know all of the people they are seeing are dying, and they are but they think renewal is kind of rare?
What they make clear in the movie is that they're not reincarnating. They're actually just dying.
Yes, so what's really happening is that they're just dying. But what do people think is happening?
People think that they are living a new life, that they are reincarnating. They think they're not actually dying. What do they think is going to happen to these people specifically? They don't say. They don't ever say that they're going into the babies or they're going into the spirit realm or whatever. They don't make that clear. Okay. I think the idea is that it's not clear and no one really says, mm-hmm. and you just chant renew and that's the whole thing.
Okay.
Yeah, I think for both of these movies, it might have been better to just cut the religious element, mm-hmm. because neither of them really ring that true. They don't seem that believable. And I feel like, to some extent, these filmmakers are responding to their more religious societies that we live in now.
Then how can we tell the evangelicals that we think they are bad?
And they're like, they gotta point out that they think that religion is bad, which we don't really feel that the point's been made. And that they can't imagine a society where people don't have some sort of token religious thing they go through. Most people in my life are not religious, and in some dystopian world would have no need for any religious thing to be part of that. But that's just not the society they're living in. I mean, I think this is maybe more of a big deal in THX because the religious thing is a bigger part. The religion here is just chanting renew and watching people fly into the sky. And
believing that you will reincarnate.
Maybe the Orson Welles part would have flipped me, but I think it would have been better if we had just cut the religious angle in both.
Yeah, I was a little bit confused by that scene because when we first see Logan and Francis watching the renewal, everyone else sort of stands up and starts chanting renew, renew. And they sort of look at each other like, these people are gauche, like we're in on it. But then eventually they do also stand up and start pumping their fists and shouting renew.
Yeah, I don't think they're thinking, oh, we're in on it. They're not in on it, as we later find out.
I know that they're not in on it, but the cinematography, the acting was
I think they're still processing just having murdered that guy.
Okay.
And they're going through that.
I think that happens.
Or is that afterwards?
That's afterwards.
Okay.
Yeah, they're in there, they're shouting renew, and then he gets the pager.
Ah, I see. Yeah, I mean, I say we should cut the religious elements, but of course, that's maybe a third of the budget of this movie is that religious element sequence. Libby, money well spent? Carousel?
I did think it was cool. I don't know enough about what $9 million is in 1970 to be able to say if that's a waste of the money.
But you feel like the carousel sequence meaningfully improved your enjoyment of the
film? Can I
film?
imagine it being better? Yeah.
Sure. But you don't think they should just cut it?
I don't think they should just cut it.
Okay.
No.
I think carousel looks stupid, and it doesn't make any sense.
So I mean, I think the world isn't going to make sense if we cut the carousel and renewal, because then people are just like, yeah, when you turn 30, you die.
They need...
Way more people would be resistant to that. they're getting told when you turn 30, which is kind of about when you start to notice problems with your body. And you'd be like, yeah, my ankles kind of bother me sometimes, or I have a couple of gray hairs. I don't like that. Time to reset and start again. So yeah, I think the society wouldn't function if everyone just thought you die at 30.
They need the situationist spectacle to keep everyone involved in the process. Oh, got it.
Yeah, they need the promise of a new life.
So much of the film is about the romance, the connection that's gradually formed. And I would say kind of an interesting love story between Logan and Jessica. They start off not compatible. They go through journeys together. They both change and grow. Do you think that Logan and Jessica, or should I say Michael and Jenny, have good romantic chemistry? Is this a good...
I don't think chemistry is real. Chemistry is not a different thing than acting. If you are good at acting, then you are good at acting like you're in love with a co-star. Like, I don't think I've ever seen someone who I'm like, oh, they're a really good actor, but they're doing a bad job of, I'm not convinced by their love for this other person. That has never come up.
Maggie McComey, who plays La in THX 1138, said that she thought that her and Robert Duvall had really good chemistry, and that was what made their romantic scenes, which I do think are a highlight, really, of the THX. They're so human and so believable. It can just be great acting skills, but okay, you don't think that's a factor here.
Yeah, I think that they're just good at acting. I think also, if you are real life in love with your co-star, you can maybe make up for a lack in acting skill by just playing that in some situations.
THX is also Maggie McComey's only acting credit. After that movie, she retired and said she didn't want to do acting anymore.
Okay. She didn't even do like film or stage
I think she had
stuff?
A couple small parts or something when she was several decades older, but no, she did not do acting after that. I thought she did a great job. There's been talk. It keeps popping up about remaking Logan's Run. For a while, it was Leonardo DiCaprio as Logan.
He does look a lot like Michael York.
Then it was Ryan Gosling as Logan. I think he left that project to do Blade Runner, the other cyberpunk one. If they remade Logan's Run today, who would your Logan and Jessica be? What would you change? It's just never going to happen.
Don't remake Logan's Run. Don't remake Logan's Run. I'm generally against remakes. This film is fine. We can just watch this film again. It's not worth it to remake it.
Yeah, I mean the film.
Also, you're gonna make the carousel look stupid.
But it looked good in this one. Just to double check on that point.
It looked fine.
Okay.
I mean.
Got it.
But I don't. I think a modern director might do as good of a job, but I think they're probably still gonna make it look stupid.
Yeah, I mean it's presented in a very artificial style, and I think part of what makes the movie work is that it's in that 70s revival of 40s film aesthetic where everything is very grand, where things don't have to look totally believable, where people are looking for a very experiential type of filmmaking, and a very naturalist style, which would have to be the style of the modern times, I think you're right, would stifle some of the creativity, and some of the ideas are just too silly to really fit and look believable and totally real. And so if that's something you need from a movie, you're not going to get it here. You know, the THX 1138 maybe could be remade more easily because that's in a cinema verite style. Again, that's supposed to look like it's a documentary that's made by people in the future. It's not supposed to look totally fictional.
But again, I'm generally against remakes, especially for a film that's already good. You're just going to make it worse. You're not going to make it better. I have a question for you. Do you think that anyone in the rebellion has actually gotten out? Or is everyone being frozen by Box, and Logan and Jessica are the first people out into the wilds of Northern Virginia?
I think we're definitely led to believe that they're the first people to escape.
Okay.
Because we're told that all the people left, then we find them in the box scene. And that box scene is one of the most... It's been on a lot of, worst movie scenes of all time lists. I'm not quite sure it's at that stage. It's a very silly scene. It's very silly. But yeah, I think we are supposed to believe that maybe one did get out, maybe it happened, but the story of the film is that all of the other runners have been caught and fed to the citizens by Box. Maybe one got out.
I thought this scene was effective, at least at the beginning. Yeah, I mean, his movement could have been done better.
Yeah, he could not control his own movement in that situation, especially if he fell down at several points in the filming. Roscoe Lee Brown fell down. I guess we should clarify, he's like in a big robo suit. He appears to be on some sort of motorized track that's moving him around. It looks a lot like Darth Vader. And there's been a lot of comparison between the box suit and Darth Vader.
I actually thought it looked like a lot like the police in THX, at least the face.
I think it looks like that too. I think it looks somewhat in between that. Did George Lucas see Logan's Run? Did that inspire Darth Vader? Maybe.
But yeah, I remember, like, Box says he's going to help them when he shows up, right?
No, he doesn't say he's going to help them. I don't remember that.
Do you know what his first line is?
I don't know. I know he says fish, plankton, and protein from the sea. Yeah. But other than that, no.
He eventually gets around to that. But I remember at first being like, oh, this is like our wise old man character.
Yeah, they give us that impression.
He's going to help them. And then like the horror of finding out that he's actually a murderer.
He's just doing his job.
Are those people still alive? Are they cryogenically frozen?
I don't think they're still alive. I don't think so. He's not using some special cryogenic freezing technology, as far as I can tell.
He's just blasting them with ice.
He's just blasting them with ice. Although those are real extras. That's not like a photograph or a painting or something. Yeah. That is a real person who really did have to stand very, very still for many minutes. And they're on screen for kind of a long time. And they do a great job of standing still. It's some of the better still work I have seen.
Well, and then a bunch of those shots got cut because too sexy.
That's right. And a lot of their work is... And even the cut scenes were deleted in The Purge, so we'll never see it.
Yeah.
Sad.
Sorry, guys.
Yeah. I think the music in the movie is really good.
Yeah.
I really like the soundtrack. It's very
exciting.
I think it's easy to kind of pass it over because it's kind of standard. It sounds a lot like a movie soundtrack from the 70s, but it's exciting and it's beautiful. I listen to this soundtrack separate from watching the movie. It's great music to listen to while you're working on something. Try the Logan Run soundtrack. It's going to get you pumped up to get some stuff done. Yeah, and it's got some layers to it. During the credit sequence, the music is a mix of a full orchestra and electronic synthesizer music played on top of it. When they're outside the city, the music is all a full orchestra with absolutely no electronic instruments. When they're inside the city, it has some strings and piano, but almost all electronic instruments. So the music is really contributing. And I didn't notice this the first time I watched the movie, but now when I watch the movie, I notice how much this does to set me in the tone of the action and help me to connect with the characters on screen. So, underrated soundtrack, heavily underrated soundtrack. For both of these movies, do you think that they are anti-technology? Are these movies about how humans are got to reject technology, how technology is bad? You know, you got the AI stuff in Logan's Run. Are these anti-technology films?
I think they're more anti-human. Like, humans, watch out for those humans using technology for evil. Do you agree?
I think you're right. I think that Logan's Run does dip a toe into this idea of technology is so convenient that it will overcome you. It is too attractive, and you will make ethically invalid decisions because you must have the convenience brought on by technology.
Yeah, well, I think I would have been interested in getting more scenes about how children are raised in both of these films, because I think if you don't know how to do anything besides interact with technology, then of course technology is easier.
Well, apparently most of the kids, or a lot of the kids...
Like, do people in Logan's Run world know how to read?
They read stuff from the computer, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
When Logan's talking to the computer, words do appear on screen, but she also says them out loud.
Definitely during the surrogation scene, or when they're having the conversation. That's true. She does also say them out loud. But I don't remember if there's a specific scene where it's not
I would
read.
Believe that since Logan is a Sandman, he gets special training and knows how to read. But it kind of seems like most of these people can't read.
Apparently, a lot of the kids are spending their whole childhood in the wildlands as cubs murdering each other.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if that was the standard experience.
I think we're led to believe that's not standard, but not too uncommon.
Okay.
But it's weird that they then just apparently are kidnapped into normal society but then everything's fine. I guess because they just love all the cool stuff so much, but like poor socialization, not an issue in Logan's Run world. I think we kind of got to give it to the movie just for this, just because we can't have our cool, fun, sexy 18 to 29 world and worry about, well, how do we get the kids in here? That's going to ruin our utopian vision. And so a very, very good point about the impracticality of the society, but would definitely be a big downer on the film. So the kids just show up. I want to give a special shout out to another film with really great extra and bit part work.
Well, for the record, maybe is Billy our little bad boy?
Billy is one of them, yes.
In the cathedral?
Yes.
If people aren't being raised by their parents and only the government or the AI is keeping track of these kids, maybe kids like Billy just get killed and don't get to go into society.
Oh, well, Logan says, in a year you'll be green and then you'll be taken into the overworld, but maybe Logan doesn't know as much as he thinks he does.
Yes, I mean, that's the point of the movie. Logan doesn't know as much as he thinks he does.
Right. No, I think that's a much better explanation, that they just kill those kids.
Only conformist kids get to
that actually
join
totally
society.
Checks out. Yeah, I think that's the answer. I do want to give a shout out to another apparently soon to be murdered child, Mary 2, who they greet first when they come down from...
She gives the bracelet back.
She gives the bracelet back.
So
I really like the
live.
Mary 2 character. Oh, I see. The AI judges her. I think once you go out into the cub world, the AI is not taking you back.
Okay.
Sorry, Mary 2. Mary 2 knows her number name. She's a good kid.
I don't want a remake of Logan's Run. I want a prequel about the kids.
Wow. That would be a hard movie to script.
What's going on in the cathedral?
Explain that situation. Make this make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would be impressed if you could pull that off. Do you think that there could be THX sequels, spinoffs? I mean, imagine if George Lucas had expanded THX world instead of Star Wars world. What would that have looked like?
You could either do it in the city, not following THX, following new characters. I would be interested. I was really interested in the lady with identified her as having a fun accent.
The New York accent or Valley Girl accent controller operator lady.
Yeah,
she was fun.
I do want to know more about her. I want to see her get awakened. Or maybe she just sort of gets broken out against her will and is like, "What's going on in the real world? What is this fucking sun?" That could be fun. Or I don't think anyone would actually make that movie, even though it would be fun. Maybe I think the movie that would get made would be THX organizes a force and breaks back in and destroys the bad
that
government.
would be good. That would be sellable and makeable.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
And then you don't have to show what I think would be a tough thing to make an entertaining movie is THX wandering around the wilderness alone, trying to figure out how Earth works. You could maybe do 3 minutes of that at the beginning. Then he finds some people.
He's got to find some other people somehow.
And we have battle for underground land.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. I like that.
I think that's really the obvious one. Everyone's into these stories about taking down the government. I wonder why. So we watched these in the order of, I'm going to say the title, THX 1138.
Ooh.
This time, no one thinks of it
Never
that
did
way.
that one in the movie.
And then Logan's Run. David, do you think that was the right order?
It's hard to say it's not the right order.
Yeah.
Both because Logan's Run with the sunlight shot, and other points is directly referencing THX 1138. Is obviously THX 1138 is at the beginning of our full countercultural revolution in the United States. Logan's Run is at the end of it. Logan's Run again is
the counterculture revolution was 5 years.
Yes.
Okay.
About.
Okay.
That's what happened. In Logan's Run again, we're starting to have really a very conservative outlook. And everyone's like, yeah, those hippies ruined everything. And now everyone's doing drugs all the time. And nobody wants to make nuclear families anymore. And that's really the theme of the movie. It's a reactionary film. And you got to know what the first reaction was to understand why we're reacting to the revolution. So I do think you got to watch them in this order. Also, THX 1038, it's a dark movie.
Yeah,
you
want some fun times.
Intentionally monotonous. It's unpleasant to watch. It deals with really sad things like entire races of people being destroyed and everyone having a horrible time every day in their life. So it might be nice to watch kind of a fun, silly movie that dealt with those similar ideas with a more hopeful message at the end.
And little kitties.
Way more people die in horrible explosions at the end of Logan's Run, but the film isn't concerned about this. So, yeah, I do think we undersold just how much fun we had with Peter Ustinov's character as the old man, his T.S. Eliot quotes, all the fun kitties at the end. That is one of my favorite and most enjoyable scenes in all of cinema.
Yeah, it's okay to not like this movie if you think it's too goofy or whatever, but you have to acknowledge that Peter Ustinov is out there casually giving one of the greatest performances of all time.
Making it up as he goes along, totally improvising this role. So he just knows T.S. Eliot poems. Yeah. He was just like, He's
and everyone, this is before Cats, so it's not like he just knows it from the musical. He just goes out there and memorizes T.S. Eliot.
I mean, you can see his process happening because he's in a room, and what is in the room? A bunch of cats and a bunch of old books. And he's just looking around like, okay, what would a guy who just spent 30 years on his own looking at cats and reading old books talk like?
I do think he fucked up by not giving the cats names from T.S. Eliot's The Naming of Cats. I think the cats are named like Thomas and Henry.
I don't remember their names.
But I'm pretty sure those are not in the poem. You gotta give them names like Admetus, Electra.
I think there's an Electra in there. I think that they're supposed to be named in some way for like famous U.S. political figures.
Okay, so he's naming them from the portraits.
I think Thomas is Thomas Jefferson, and he's just going with the names he sees around in the Capitol. Because I think we said he's in the U.S. Capitol building.
Yes.
We do have a police standoff in the Capitol, so watch out for that part.
The kitties have taken over the Capitol.
The kitties have taken over the Capitol this time, and
I want to live in that timeline.
So,
install the kitty president. Don't act like that wouldn't be better.
So I think
we would need to find a 35-year-old cat.
I think Thomas the cat is Thomas Jefferson the cat. That's he's looking at the little plaques underneath the portraits he's collecting.
Okay.
So yeah, I say definitely watch THX first. I mean, on the other hand, if you, like me, really like this type of movie, then I don't think it really matters. If you're already very up on the cultural situation, if you're not going to be too beat up by THX and not want that to be your lasting taste, then I don't actually think it really matters. I think either way is fine.
Yeah, I don't think... If you're in a situation where it makes more sense to watch Logan's Run first, that's totally fine and is not going to ruin your viewing experience. So that's it for this episode. But David, I'm feeling kind of sad that we didn't get to see any Orson Welles.
Did someone say Orson Welles? Next up, this is it, people. It's the big one. It's Jane Eyre from 1943 and Rebecca from 1940.
Now, these are both films that have been adapted about 1 million times. I think Jane Eyre might be the most adapted book ever.
I wouldn't bet on it, but it's up there.
The Bible doesn't count, multiple authors. So just make sure you're watching the right ones. Check the dates. Also, Joan Fontaine stars in both of these films. That's how you'll know you're doing it right. And one more thing, normally this podcast is open to people who care about spoilers and people who don't care about spoilers and just listen to the podcast without having watched the films. I do want to let you know both of these stories do have pretty major plot twists that occur like 3/4 of the way through the book. So if you haven't seen another adaptation, seen these films, read the books before listening to the podcast, this is an instance where I do actually recommend doing that.
I am really excited about this one. I think Rebecca in particular, I think that's like the only book that is in both of our top 10 books of all time or something along those lines. So I've also never seen either of these classic movies. And I'm a huge fan of Orson Welles. And I already mentioned that I like Aldous Huxley's writing, and he wrote Jane Eyre. And so...
the script.
Yes. Yeah, he did not actually write the... We'll get into that. But yeah, I mean, also, like, let's be honest. We all know what YouTube channel this is. And so, we are on brand. And I'm looking forward to that connecting experience.
And this is also our first Alfred Hitchcock, who might be the most famous director that we haven't done yet.
Yeah, I agree. It's we haven't done a lot of the classic directors. Have we done Cecil B. DeMille yet?
No, but we've done William Wyler. We've done Vincent Minnelli.
Sure. It's going to be exciting.
I think more people know the name Alfred Hitchcock than know the name Cecil B. DeMille.
That's a very fair point.